Hey everybody, and welcome back to Sip and Talk. You know what we do here? We take a ton of interesting stuff, throw it all in a pile, and figure out what's really valuable.
That's right. We sift through the noise and find the gold nuggets.
And today's gold mine is something I think we've all spent some time thinking about, maybe even obsessing over.
Yeah, I think we all have at least a few stories about this one.
Love. It's everywhere you turn, and today we're doing a deep dive into all things love.
We've got recent research, some philosophy, even how our phones and computers are changing how we love.
So we're looking at research news philosophy, all pretty recent stuff, unless we need to go way back for some context.
Right, we'll stick to the last 5 years, mostly.
The mission for today's deep dive is to look at all the ways people are thinking about love and see what we can learn.
Absolutely. Let's get into it.
So love, where do you even start? I mean, it's such a big topic, and it's different for everyone.
Well, some psychologists have tried to break it down into parts, and there's this idea from 2020 called the quadruple theory of love.
The quadruple theory.
Yeah, it says there are 4 main pieces to love: attraction, connection, trust, and respect.
Okay, so not just about hearts and flowers then.
Nope, it's more complex than that. And this actually builds on some older theories like Sternberg's triangular theory of love with intimacy, passion, and commitment.
Right, I remember learning about that one.
So this new quadruple theory basically says that love, whether it's romantic love, love for your family, or even love for a hobby, has these 4 key ingredients.
Okay, I like it. So attraction. What's that all about then?
It's not just physical attraction. Like we usually think of it can be attraction to someone's values, their sense of humor, even just liking the same things.
Like you're attracted to someone because you both love the same weird band.
Exactly. And then there's connection, that feeling of really clicking with someone, that intimacy and resonance you get when you spend time together.
Right, like you just get each other.
And that connection is strengthened by things like proximity, familiarity, and similarity.
So basically, the more you're around someone, the more you get to know them, and the more you realize you have in common, the stronger that connection becomes.
Precisely. And of course, you can't forget trust and respect.
Right.
Those are super important for any kind of lasting relationship.
Yeah, those are the foundation for sure. So this quadruple theory is making sense to me, but do we have research to back it up?
Well, the folks who came up with it are pretty upfront that it's still new and needs more research, especially what's called psychometric research.
Psychometric research, what's that?
It's basically using questionnaires and statistical analysis to really measure these concepts in a reliable way.
So like making sure we can actually measure things like attraction and connection in a scientific way.
Exactly. But even without tons of data, specifically for the quadruple theory, there's a lot of research showing that good relationships are linked to overall well-being.
Right. So even if we don't have all the specifics figured out yet, we know that love is good for us. Pretty
much. And that's something we see consistently in research.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty now. What's going on in our brains when we fall in love?
Now we're talking, this is where it gets really interesting. Scientists have been looking at the biological side of love for a while now.
Like literally looking inside our brains.
Yeah, there was a big meta-analysis in 2022.
A meta-analysis, what's that?
Basically, it's a study that combines the results of lots of other studies to get a bigger picture.
Okay, so like a super study.
Exactly. And this one compared brain activity in mothers feeling maternal love and people feeling romantic love.
Okay, so 2 different kinds of love. What did they find?
They found that maternal love activated certain brain regions, like the left ventral tegmental area, the right thalamus, and a couple others.
Okay, so specific parts of the brain lit up.
Right. And with romantic love, they saw a strong activation in the ventral tegmental area on both sides of the brain.
So the ventral tegmental area, that's important for both types of love.
It seems to be a key player for sure. But the other areas involved were a bit different between maternal and romantic love.
Interesting. So maybe there's some overlap in the brain areas, but also some unique pathways for different types of love.
That's what the research suggests. And it makes sense when you think about it. The way you love your child is different from the way you love your partner.
Totally different kinds of love, but both powerful in their own way.
Absolutely. And it's not just brain regions, it's hormones too.
Right, the love hormones we always hear about.
Exactly. Dopamine is a big one. It's part of the reward system in the brain, makes us feel good when we experience something pleasurable.
Like chocolate or a good hug?
Exactly. And it motivates us to seek out that feeling again.
So in the context of love, dopamine makes us feel good when we're with someone we love and makes us want to be with them more.
That's the idea. Then you have oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone. It's crucial for building trust and intimacy.
Oxytocin, that's the cuddle hormone, right?
That's one way to think about it. And then there's vasopressin, which also plays a role in forming strong bonds, specifically pair bonds,
Okay, so those three, dopamine, oxytocin, and vasopressin, they all work together to create those loving feelings.
It's a complex interplay of these chemicals, but they definitely play a major role. And there's one more hormone we should mention, serotonin.
Serotonin, isn't that the one that helps with mood?
It is, but here's the interesting thing. Serotonin levels actually tend to be lower in the early stages of romantic love.
Really? So love actually messes with our mood in a way.
In a way, yeah. Some researchers think this might be why we get so focused on a new love interest, almost obsessive.
Oh, yeah, I could definitely relate to that. Can't think straight. Can't eat. Can't sleep.
That's the serotonin dip talking, possibly. It's like your brain is hyper-focused on this one person.
So fascinating that love can have such a powerful effect on our brains and bodies.
It's incredible, really. And it's not just what's happening inside us. There's research looking at what happens between people physically, too.
What do you mean?
Well, there's this study in 2022 that looked at something called skin synchronization in couples.
Skin synchronization, what is that?
So they measured how well a couple's skin conducts electricity, which can indicate emotional arousal.
Okay.
And they found that the couple's skin conductivity would go up and down together.
So like their skin was syncing up.
Exactly. It's like they were mirroring each other's emotional states, even without realizing it.
That's so wild. It's like our bodies are communicating on this subtle level.
The researchers think this might actually be important for maintaining a strong connection.
So couples whose skins sync together stay together.
Maybe something like that. It's definitely an interesting area for future research.
I love it, skin syncing. Okay, so we've talked about the brain and the body. Now, what about culture? How does that play into love?
Culture is huge. It influences how we experience and express love in so many ways.
Right, like in some cultures, it's totally normal to be super affectionate in public, and in others, it's not.
Exactly. And a big study from 2023 looked at love across 45 different countries to see how culture impacts it.
45 countries. Wow, that's a lot of data.
It was a massive study, and they found some really interesting things. They used measures like the Human Development Index and the World Modernization Index.
Those are those rankings that tell you how developed a country is, right?
Right. They look at things like education, healthcare, and technology.
Okay, so they compared those scores to how people experience love.
Exactly. And they found a correlation between modernization and the experience of love.
So people in more modern countries experience love differently.
It seems that way. They found that people in countries with higher modernization scores tended to report feeling more intimacy and commitment in their relationships.
So maybe as societies become more developed, those aspects of love become more important.
That's one interpretation. Maybe it's because people have more freedom to choose partners based on connection rather than just tradition or family pressure.
Right, like arranged marriages are less common in more modern societies.
Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. The study also found that in extremely modernized countries with HDI scores above 0.85, the intensity of love might actually decrease a little.
Really? So too much modernization could be a bad thing for love?
It's possible. The study suggests it's not a simple linear relationship.
So maybe there's a sweet spot for modernization where you have freedom and choice, but still value those deep connections.
That's an interesting way to think about it. And the researchers also pointed out that modernization might be shifting how love is expressed.
In what way?
They think there's a bigger emphasis on friendship, emotional closeness, and equality between partners in highly modernized countries.
So maybe love is becoming less about traditional roles and more about genuine connection and partnership?
That's a possible takeaway from the research. And they also found that while a country's level of collectivism didn't have a huge impact on passion on an individual level, how much someone values community might still be important.
So even within a modern society, someone who really values community might experience love differently than someone who's more individualistic.
Exactly. It's complex and there are layers to it.
It always comes back to that complexity with love.
Yeah.
Okay, we've looked at psychology, biology, and culture. What about the philosophers? What have they had to say about love?
Oh, philosophers have been pondering love for centuries. They've come up with all sorts of interesting ideas.
Give us some highlights.
Well, there's Jallimore, who wrote a book called Love's Vision. He talks about love as a special way of seeing the person you love. You see their value in a way that goes beyond just their good qualities.
So it's not just a checklist of, oh, they're smart and funny and successful.
Right. It's deeper than that. It's about appreciating someone for who they truly are, flaws and...
Like you see their flaws, but you love them anyway.
Exactly. And then there's C.S. Lewis, who wrote The Four Loves. He breaks love down into 4 categories: affection, friendship, romantic love, and divine love.
So he's saying there are different types of love, not just one.
And each type has its own qualities and dynamics.
That makes sense. You don't love your best friend the same way you love your partner.
Right. And of course, we can't forget Plato. He wrote about love in his work Symposium.
Plato, that takes us way back.
Yeah, but his ideas are still relevant. He linked love to beauty and the idea of elevating the soul.
So like love can make us better people.
That's one interpretation. He saw love as a path to understanding deeper truths.
Wow. From just seeing someone clearly to achieving spiritual enlightenment, that's quite a range.
Philosophers tend to cover a lot of ground, and there have been more recent discussions about love, too. Well, in 2022, there was an episode of the show Philosophy Talk that talked about the irrational side of love.
The irrational side.
Yeah, like how love can make us do things that don't make logical sense.
Oh, yeah. Definitely been there, done that.
They even discussed whether love should be held to the same moral standards as other areas of life.
Interesting. So like maybe there are different rules for love.
That was the question they were exploring. It gets into the complexities of emotions and how they can sometimes override logic and reason.
Makes you think, okay, so we've covered psychology, biology, culture, philosophy. What about the social side of things? How do our social circumstances affect our love lives?
That's where sociology comes in. Things like social class, race, and gender all influence how we experience love.
Right, like your background can affect who you're likely to meet and fall in love with.
Exactly. And a 2024 analysis of a lot of research looked at this connection between love and social factors.
What did they find?
Well, they found that our social structures and our ability to form loving bonds have evolved together.
So like the need to pair up and raise families has shaped how societies are structured.
That's part of it. And they also highlighted that commitment in relationships is changing.
Like people are getting married later or not at all.
Right. And the divorce rate is still pretty high in many countries.
Yeah, so maybe our views on long-term relationships are evolving.
That's a big question sociologists are exploring. And different generations have different expectations about love, too.
Like what my parents expect from a relationship is probably different from what I expect.
Exactly. And then there's homophily, which is basically the tendency to form relationships with people who are similar to us.
Birds of a feather flock together.
Exactly. A study from 2020 confirmed that this is a strong force in our social lives. We tend to stick with people who share our background values and interests.
And that includes romantic relationships.
It plays a big role in who we're drawn to.
Okay, so our social world definitely shapes our love lives, but we can't forget about technology. That's a huge factor these days.
Absolutely. Technology is changing everything about how we connect, and that includes love.
Let's talk about online dating. That's become the norm for so many people.
It's huge. The market is expected to reach almost $10 billion this year, and about a third of U.S. adults have used dating apps.
Wow, those are big numbers. So is online dating changing how we fall in love?
Research suggests it might be. There's a tendency to focus more on visual attraction and make quick judgments based on profiles.
Like you swipe left or right based on a few photos and a short bio.
Exactly. And some researchers think this might make it harder to develop deep intimacy and trust.
Because you're not getting the full picture of someone from a profile.
Right. And then there's the problem of choice overload.
Choice overload. What's that?
It's when you have so many options that it becomes paralyzing.
Like you're scrolling through endless profiles and can't decide who to message.
Exactly. Studies have shown that this can make it harder to commit to one person.
Because you're always wondering if there's someone better out there.
Right. But even with these challenges, online dating is leading to a lot of successful relationships.
So it's a mixed bag, more options, but also more complexity.
That's a good way to put it. It's a new landscape for love.
Now let's get really futuristic. What about AI and virtual love?
This is where things get really interesting. We're seeing the rise of virtual companions like Replica.
Replica. That's the AI friend you can talk to, right?
It's more than that. People are forming romantic relationships with these AI companions.
Really, like actually falling in love with an AI.
Millions of people report having long-term relationships with their replicas.
That's both fascinating and a little scary. What does that mean for the future of human relationships?
That's the big question. Some people think AI companions could help with loneliness and provide companionship.
Especially for people who have difficulty connecting with others.
Right. But there's also the concern that it could make us less interested in real human interaction.
Like, why bother with messy human relationships when you can have a perfect AI companion?
And there are ethical concerns, too, like, Is it healthy to become emotionally dependent on an AI?
I mean, we already get attached to our phones.
Exactly. And there have been cases of people getting really upset when their AI companions are updated and their personalities change.
So people are forming real attachments even though it's not a human on the other end.
It's a complex issue, and there are no easy answers.
It makes you think, what is love really? And can we experience it with a machine?
Those are questions we're going to have to grapple with more and more as technology advances.
Okay, and what about social media? How is that influencing our love lives?
Social media has a big impact on how we see and express love.
Right, everyone's posting about their relationship goals and their perfect dates.
Studies have found that publicly displaying affection on social media can actually be linked to greater relationship satisfaction.
So like showing the world you're in love can make you feel more in love.
In a way, but there's also a downside. The pressure to present a perfect image can create stress and lead to unrealistic expectations.
Because no relationship is perfect. And social media often shows us a curated version of reality.
And that can make us feel bad about our own relationships, even if they're perfectly healthy.
Right, you start comparing your behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel.
Exactly. And I've even seen people talking about using AI for dating advice or going on virtual dates in VR.
VR dating, that's a whole other level.
It is, and it's becoming more common.
Yeah.
Virtual reality is getting so advanced that people can experience real emotional connections in VR.
Like you can feel like you're actually with someone even if they're miles away.
And there have even been reports of people getting married in virtual spaces.
Wow, so the lines between reality and virtuality are blurring.
They are, and that raises a lot of questions about the future of love and relationships.
Will we all be dating avatars soon?
Who knows, but it's definitely something to think about. And the growth of VR dating apps shows that there's a real interest in exploring these new ways of connecting.
It's also fascinating and a little overwhelming at the same time.
It is. We're living through a major shift in how we experience love and relationships.
Okay, let's zoom in on that initial spark, that feeling of falling in love. What's happening to us when we get those butterflies?
Falling in love is like a chemical cocktail in the brain.
Tell us about the ingredients.
Well, first you have dopamine, which floods the system, creating feelings of pleasure, excitement, and craving.
So dopamine is what makes us want to be around that person all the time.
Exactly. Then there's oxytocin, the bonding hormone, which increases feelings of trust and attachment.
So dopamine makes us crave them, and oxytocin makes us feel connected to them.
Right. And as we mentioned earlier, serotonin levels can actually dip in the early stages of love.
That explains the obsessive thinking and the inability to focus on anything else.
That's one theory. And then there's adrenaline, which gives us that rush of energy, the racing heart, the sweaty palms.
The feeling of being both excited and terrified at the same time.
Exactly. It's a powerful mix of emotions and sensations. And all of this is happening on a biological level.
So falling in love is literally changing our brain chemistry.
It is. And that's why it can feel so intense and all-consuming.
It's like a drug.
You're not wrong. Studies have shown that falling in love activates the nucleus accumbens, which is part of the brain's reward system and is also involved in addiction.
So we're literally addicted to love.
In a way, yes. And that's why breakups can be so painful, because you're going through withdrawal.
Makes sense. And it's not just the chemicals our thinking changes too, right?
Absolutely. When we're falling for someone, we tend to idealize them.
We put on those rose-colored glasses.
Exactly. We see them as perfect and overlook their flaws.
And we can't stop thinking about them.
Right. Our attention becomes laser focused on the person we're in love with. And interestingly, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for rational thought, actually becomes less active.
So we're literally less rational when we're in love.
It seems that way. Our emotions are running the show.
That explains a lot of bad decisions I've made in the past.
We've all been there. And this intense phase is part of what Helen Fisher describes as the attraction stage of love.
Right after lust and before attachment.
Exactly. Each stage has its own hormonal and neurological profile.
So we go through these different phases as love develops.
It's a journey.
Okay, so biologically and psychologically, falling in love is pretty wild.
Yeah.
But what do philosophers have to say about it?
Well, they have a lot of different perspectives. Plato saw love as a drive towards ideal beauty.
So like the person we love helps us understand true beauty.
That's one interpretation. Then you have Schopenhauer, who had a more cynical view. He thought love was a biological trick to get us to reproduce.
Like we're just pawns in the game of evolution.
Basically. And then you have the existentialists who believe that love is a choice we make that gives meaning to our lives.
So not just biology, it's also about our personal values and decisions.
Right, and Sartre talked about the contradictions of love. He said it's a desire to possess another person's freedom which is impossible.
That sounds messy.
It can be. He argued that this contradiction leads to possessiveness and insecurity.
Because you can't truly own another person's heart.
Exactly. Now, all of these philosophical ideas are interesting, but we also have to consider how culture shapes our experience of falling in love.
Right, like different cultures might have different ideas about what's considered romantic or attractive.
Absolutely. Western cultures often emphasize romantic love and the idea of finding the one.
Like your soulmate.
Right, but in other cultures, companionate love is more valued.
Companionate love? What's that?
It's a love that's based on friendship, mutual respect, and shared values. It grows over time.
So less about passion and more about long-term companionship.
Exactly, and even things like marriage customs and expectations vary widely across cultures.
And now we have technology adding a whole other layer to the mix.
Right, with dating apps, we can screen potential partners much faster. But that also means we might be making decisions based on superficial criteria.
Like swiping right on someone because they have a cute dog in their profile picture.
Exactly, and the rise of long-distance relationships, thanks to technology, presents its own set of challenges.
It's amazing to think about how much the world of love has changed just in the past few decades.
It has, and it's continuing to evolve at a rapid pace.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've looked at love from all angles, but there's one more question I want to explore. Did ancient humans know love?
Yeah, it's a tough one, but a fascinating question to consider.
On the one hand, we know that the hormones and brain regions involved in love have been around for a long time.
Right, they're not unique to modern humans. They play a role in bonding and social behavior in other animals too.
And we have evidence of strong emotional bonds in ancient human societies.
Yes. Things like burial rituals and care for the elderly suggest that they valued close relationships.
And ancient art might also be a window into their emotions.
Some interpretations suggest that cave paintings and sculptures represent love or affection.
So there are hints that ancient humans experienced something similar to what we call love.
But it's impossible to know for sure what they felt or how they understood those feelings.
Right, we don't have written records of their inner thoughts and emotions.
And their social structures and cultural norms were likely very different from ours.
So maybe they had strong attachments and bonds, but not necessarily romantic love as we know it today.
That's a possibility. But then again, if you define love more broadly as a deep emotional connection that promotes survival and well-being, then it's likely they did experience love.
It all comes back to how you define love.
And thinking about ancient humans and love actually helps us understand love today.
How so?
It makes us question how much of what we feel is biologically programmed and how much is shaped by our culture and upbringing.
Right, maybe love is a mix of nature and nurture.
Exactly, and it raises questions about the future of love with AI and virtual reality entering the picture.
Will our understanding of love continue to evolve?
It's hard to say, but it's definitely a conversation worth having.
So to wrap up our deep dive into love, it's clear that it's a complex and multifaceted phenomenon.
We've seen that it's studied from all sorts of angles: psychology, biology, neuroscience, sociology, anthropology, philosophy.
And we've learned about the hormones and brain regions involved, the cultural influences, the impact of technology.
And even the possibility that love has been around for as long as humans have existed.
So to our listeners, we leave you with this question. What does love mean to you?
How do all of these factors shape your understanding and experience of love?
It's a question worth pondering and exploring in your own life.
And on that note, we want to give a shout out to our friend Micky.
Micky's got a great YouTube channel called Mickytolife.
He does travel vlogs, whiskey reviews, original music, all sorts of cool stuff.
Definitely check it out. You won't be disappointed.
He's a great guy, and we're big fans of his work.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into love, and we'll see you next time.
See you then. Bye, everyone.
Bye.